Salutations, my Morbid Maggots! Joker here, welcoming you back to the Morbid Veil. We did a poll towards the end of May to see which project we should finish first. And would you know it? Our surprise character build was the winner! We recently rediscovered one of our favorite childhood movies, and we thought, hey, why not make a character build from the villain? And so that's exactly what we did. Ladies and gentlemen, Knights of the Round Table and friends of Dragon Country, allow me to introduce you to Ruba, the Tyrant. The great island of Camelot, off the coast of Somerset, was 3 tribes of Alt-Nords, a half-breed race of Altmer and Nords. These people were taller and stronger than the regular Nords, but were not as skilled with magic as the Altmer to the east. The island was divided into 3 tribes, and war ravaged the land. Brother fought brother, and the only hope for peace was in the legend of the Daedric artifact Umbra. The blade was a potent force, and its own soul would corrupt those who would wield it. So Akatosh himself bound the sword in a stone that would keep it imprisoned. As the legend was told, only the one whose soul could withstand the influence of Umbra could free the magical sword from the stone and unite the people. Many tried. All failed. Then, 20 years before the Great War began, an unexpected hero stepped forth. His name was Magnus. The young man drew the sword from the stone, and over the next 10 years, Magnus led the people, and together they built the greatest kingdom in Nirn. Until that fateful day, Ruba, one of the Alt-Nords from the south, who were the strongest and most barbaric of the tribes, fell prey to the whispers of Umbra. Though Magnus and the rest of Camelot were immune to the whispers, Ruba, for some reason, was not. The blade tempted the mighty warrior, and Ruba attacked. He killed 4 guards before reaching Magnus, who simply held up the blade and repelled Ruba with a single powerful blast of magical energy. Ruba swore revenge, vowing that one day the sword would be his. Ruba fled into the wilderness, and for 10 years Camelot prospered. Peace and prosperity reigned throughout all the land. Then, a week before the Great War, Ruba sent a mighty griffin to attack the knight's tower. It wounded Magnus and fled with the mighty sword Umbra in its claws. However, the griffin was on its way to certain death. As it neared Ruba's camp, it was shot down by a group of poachers. They brought the mighty beast down and slaughtered it. As they unraveled the net, they discovered the sword. Immediately, the whispers of Umbra attacked their minds, and the poachers began slaughtering one another, until only one stood victorious. The leader of the poachers took the blade and fled north with it, slaughtering anyone who dared to even look at the sword. Meanwhile, Ruba and his men searched for the griffin, and finally stumbled upon its mangled, bloodied remains. They searched the poachers' bodies and the body of the griffin, but Umbra was nowhere to be found. As Ruber and his men prepared to track the only footprints that led away from the camp, the Great War broke out. Ruber fought ferociously against everyone. Imperials and Thalmor alike fell to the blades of him and his men. But they inevitably lost the Trail of Umbra, and the war continued. For decades, Ruber sought after the sword, but to no avail. As he dreamed one night, he was visited by a vision of tentacles, eyes, books covered in black smoke, and one book bound in flesh. When he awoke, Ruber summoned his men, and they proceeded to Skyrim in search of a mythical book called the Ogma Infinium, which he believed would help him in obtaining the sword. As they entered deep into Skyrim, Ruber and his men were attacked by blue-cloaked warriors. Though all of Ruber's men fell, he did not, and slaughtered a dozen men before a thundering roar forced him back. He hit his head on a rock, and days later Ruber awoke on a cart, being taken to Helgen. His memory was foggy, and he could remember very little but his name, the tentacles, the eyes, and the sword was still imprinted on his memory. He fled Helgen with the aid of Hadvar, and soon after began his quest for the Ogma Infinium. And now for the skills. Ulfric's powerful shout had knocked Ruber against a large rock, causing him to suffer from amnesia. As he begins to re-hone his skills, little tricks return to his memory. From how to decapitate someone with ease, to the few arcane secrets he had learned throughout the years. But through his travels in Skyrim, he picks up more skills in speechcraft and becomes well-versed in the art of intimidation. Once he discovers the secrets of the Ogma Infinium, Ruber sets out to learn more about the arcane arts. Luckily for him, the College of Winterhold was just a short swim away. He focuses on the schools of destruction, conjuration, and enchanting. But his skills are still limited. He can only seem to cast fire spells, raise the dead, but can utilize many enchantments. This weakness leads him to seek out the knowledge of alchemy, and eventually he succeeds in enhancing his own arcane skills through the use of potent potions. Ruber wears a set of Daedric mail armor. Each piece is enchanted to aid him in combat and enhance his already formidable strength. Since his enchantments, it's been rumored that he can take out a dragon in one hit. And now for the gameplay. Early on, Ruber is forced to interact with people as his memory is shot, and he finds that he remembers very little. He seeks knowledge on magic, the Daedra, and of course, looks into any rumors he may find that lead him to the mythical sword Umbra. Once he becomes a force to be reckoned with once again, Ruber's tactics change. Early on, he would block, attack, and flee. But with his memory of combat returned and enhanced, he becomes an unstoppable force. He starts off in combat by resurrecting a fallen enemy, or sends in one of his undead thralls, then proceeds to jump into the fight, slashing away with his mighty sword. He lives for battle and revels in the bloodshed. However, he knows that sometimes he must resort to magic. He uses unbound flames and fireballs when attacking enemies at a distance. As they get closer, he'll begin to use spells such as Wall of Flames. Whenever Ruber has to get through enemies quickly, he'll sheath his sword and attack with his bare hands. Most enemies fall from one hit, but some, mostly dragons, fall after a few. And now for the devastating powers used by Ruber. Barbaric Rage is performed by Ruber unleashing a devastating roar that causes the sky to darken and lightning to strike. He casts a flaming cloak and runs at his enemies barehanded, beating them to a bloody pulp. Camelot's Agony is one of the most perverted spells in Ruber's arsenal. He commands his thralls to raise their arms and sends them into battle. From a distance, he casts fireballs, but will continue to resurrect the undead knights whenever another has fallen. The last and most powerful of Ruba's powers is Tyrant. This is when Ruba unleashes his full power against the world. He summons the undead dragon Durnavir, casts a flame cloak around himself, and draws Umbra from his back, stealing the souls of all those he slays. And now for the timeline. After obtaining all of the knowledge he can from the College of Winterhold, Ruba decides to set out for Whiterun and see if there's any news on the dragon. He finds the Jarl bickering about whether or not a dragon actually attacked, and Ruba tells him exactly what happened at Helgen. He then gives the old dragon stone to Farengar, and soon after a dragon attacks the watchtower. Ruba revels in the opportunity to kill a dragon, and is filled with pride when he deals the final blow. However, something unexpected happens. He consumes the soul of the dragon, and finds that he has a strong ability to shout like the dragons do. He becomes the new Thane of Whiterun, and sets out to slay even more dragons. During this time, he enhances his knowledge of alchemy, and eventually begins to use various potions and poisons in combat. Soon after obtaining great power and knowledge from the Greybeards and fallen dragons, Ruba heads to Solstheim, where he feels the power of Hermaeus Mora. He actively seeks the Black Books, and soon he unravels the secrets of Apocrypha, but at a terrible price. The years of obsessing over Umbra, paired with the maddening side effects of Apocrypha, caused Ruba to become slightly unhinged. His mind became warped, but this would eventually work to his advantage. After his first confrontation with Miraak, Ruba began to seek out Umbra once again, believing that the sword would be the only way he could defeat the ancient dragon priest. Within a week, Ruba managed to locate Umbra's final resting place, deep within a barrow. Ruba would find the poacher who had stolen his prize. The battle was fierce and devastating, but Ruba managed to emerge unscathed. He held Umbra in his hands, and the power of the blade filled his very being. However, the blade found that it could not influence the barbaric warrior. The maddening effects of Apocrypha had warped Ruba's mind to such a degree that Umbra could not influence him in any way. The sword had become a slave to a mortal once again, but this time it would be used properly. Magnus used the sword only for defense and rarely offense, but Ruba planned to use the sword as it was intended, to steal the life and souls of all those it struck down. With Umbra in his hand, Ruba returned to Solstheim, and on the summit of Apocrypha, he slew Miraak. With over a dozen souls filling Ruba's being, the warrior became a more formidable beast. He returned to Skyrim once again, and rebuilt the blades with his mightiest companions. He slaughtered Parthenax and Alduin, and soon after began his conquest over all of Skyrim. Once Skyrim had been brought under his heel, Ruba set out for Camelot. Though the Great War had ravaged many parts of Tamriel, Magnus's Sigic monk Merlin had placed a protective barrier around the island that ensured they would be safe from harm. But Ruba was now in possession of Umbra. With a mighty swing, he broke Merlin's barrier, and Ruba's army swarmed the island. Dragons plagued the skies above, and his blades marched across the ground below. Magnus rallied his troops to the High Reach, the magnificent castle that stood strong at the center of Camelot. There they made their last stand, but Ruber's dragons made short work of the castle. Together, Ruber and his dragons combined their unrelenting force shouts, and the walls of High Reach crumbled to dust. Ruber's armies spared no one within the castle walls, and eventually Magnus was captured. Ruber stood proud over the former king of Camelot and boasted about how he will finally have his revenge. With one mighty swing, Magnus's head was severed from his shoulders, and Ruber's armies proclaimed him as king. Many knelt before Ruber, but those who didn't were fed to the dragons. Ruber's conquest was complete, but he had seen the rest of the world, and his hunger for conquest knew no bounds. His army swept across the lands of Tamriel, and one after another the countries fell to him. Soon all was under his command, but it could not satiate his appetite for conquest and domination. Ruber began to grow mad without anything left to conquer, and his ferocity grew to unimaginable levels. It was then that he was approached by a monstrous beast, Molag Bal himself. The two made a pact, and with Ruber as his mighty general, Molag Bal conquered many of the realms of Oblivion. But the god of schemes and domination underestimated his mortal servant. Ruber had learned much throughout the century, and once all the realms of Oblivion were under Molag Bal's rule, Ruber attacked. In a desperate attempt to save his life, Molag Bal attempted to flee into the void, but Ruber held up the Amulet of Kings, and through it he focused his Thuum. Molag Bal's power and soul were ripped from his body, and Ruber absorbed it effortlessly. As Ruber merged the realms into one, he consumed the souls of the imprisoned Daedric princes. He sat upon his mighty throne, observing all that he had conquered. For 9,000 years he reigned over the barbaric and war-ravaged world, until the day the sky tore in two. Alduin had returned, remade as the World Eater he was meant to be. Ruber drew Umbra from his back, and with a hellish grin, he charged at the mighty dragon.
There is no prey.
We hope you enjoyed our surprise character build, Ruber the Tyrant. If you haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to be notified of our future videos. Have a great rest of your week, everybody, and we'll see you all here next time on the Morbid Veil.